This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/princessweeks. This video contains spoilers for The Stepford Wives 1975 and 2004, Don't Worry Darling, Get Out, and Fatal Attraction. When watching the trailer for Don't Worry Darling, it is almost impossible not to think of The Stepford Wives and the legacy of feminist satire that it started, both as a book and later on as a film. But that was never really used well or effectively since the first adaptation of the source material. In this video, we are going to discuss the 1975 and 2004 adaptations of The Stepford Wives. And then we're going to discuss Don't Worry Darling and the reason why the feminist message of the 70s version was subsequently lost as it was readapted and retreaded in other works. Just as a note, I know that Olivia Wilde is dealing with all kinds of hashtag
discourse
about being a hashtag
girl boss.
This video is just going to be about Don't Worry Darling when I discuss it, not about Wilde, because quite frankly, none of my business, don't care. I don't know these people, and I think there's plenty to criticize about how she handled Don't Worry Darling without getting into anything else. So on that note, let's talk Stepford Wives. In 1975, The Stepford Wives was released, based on the 1974 novel from Ira Levin, whose work had already been turned into box office and critical gold with Rosemary's Baby. Stepford starred Catherine Ross as Joanne Eberhardt, whose husband Walter moves her and their two children suddenly from bright, beautiful New York City to Stepford, Connecticut. Joanna is a young and inspiring photographer who finds the entire place to be stifling and filled with women who are endlessly devoted to their wifely duties, especially cleaning.
I didn't bake anything yesterday. It took me so long to get the upstairs floor to shine. I didn't have any time to bake.
And just have in general strange behaviors. And then there's that Men Association, a group that all the men in town seem to be obsessed with, but have no real concrete goals, motto. They're just an association of men, like a little Matt Walsh fan club. Watch Jessie Gender's video on Matt Walsh. It is 4 hours of education you will not regret. Anyway, Joanna befriends two other women, Bobby Marco, another recent newcomer to Stepford, and Charmaine. Slowly, as Joanna forms bonds and tries to create a women's club,
A bitching session, you mean?
she realizes, first with Charmaine and later with Bobby, that these women will go away on these trips with their husbands and then return as proper Stepford wives. Charmaine paves over her tennis court and Bobby starts cleaning. Gross.
I was a joke. Dave works hard all day long, and what does he come home to? A slob.
Bobby, it's gotten to you now.
Nothing's got me. I just want to look like a woman.
I hate cleaning. I only do it because I have a one bedroom and my cat needs her space. Right, Lola? The term Stepford Wives has become ubiquitous within pop culture, but in case you don't know, the men, they kill their wives and replace them with robots. It's a lot. In fact, part of their ability to do so is because the leader of the men's club is nicknamed Diz, because he's a former Disney engineer. Imagine the technology of Disney in the 70s being used to make lifelike robot wife fleshlights. When I first read the book and watched the movie, I already knew what the conclusion was going to be. It's like at this point, if you watch something like Get Out, you kind of know what the sunken place is, even if you don't know how we get there. The terror of the book and the suspense of the film was the Hitchcockian voyeurism of being an audience member, knowing that Joanna is going to be killed and turned into a robot. Her fate is fixed, and no matter how many times you watch, she is strangled with stockings by her robot doppelganger. And it is that knowledge that makes rewatching it so stressful. Watching the scene where Joanna is making tea for the men's association and sort of playing the whole housewife thing, you realize that her every action is being observed in order to make her replicant, that her husband is actively and intentionally gaslighting her in order to make sure that this happens.
Bobby Marco buys a new bride, I gotta pay for a new mailbox for the Van Sands. So what? So what are you talking about, Joanna?
Why can't you understand? Her kitchen was sparkling.
Yeah, so you said. But look, now, I hate to come on like the heavy, but what's that got to do with you going crazy?
It wasn't just that. It wasn't just anything. She's changed. And stop telling me I'm crazy.
No matter how many times I watch it, the scene where Joanna comforts a drunken Walt at the fire and he says he loves her is upsetting, because knowing the context of the film, you know that Walter has just decided to kill his wife and replace her with a hot Hall of the President's robot.
I love you. I really love you. Do you know that? I really do. And I know I screwed this whole thing up. You didn't want to move here.
Look,
I know
I'll
that.
get over it. I've already gotten
No,
over
but
it. That's
do
not
you,
what I'm talking about.
do you understand that I really love you?
Yes.
You know, what do you know about love? What do you possibly think you know about love?
It's incredibly chilling. And these wives can't consent. They can't fight back. They're not even human. They are just fleshlights made sentient enough, anyway, to watch children clean house and be fondled. It's disgusting and horrific to watch, but it does, oddly enough, precursor the backlash that women in the 80s and 90s would feel following all the successes of feminism of the previous wave.
Ted's doing really well in his scientific research now, and I give him a good home. I really think that helps. The kids are doing the best they've ever done in school, and I'm here all the time. I know that helps too. I'm really off the booze, and God knows that's better. It's none of your business, but our sex life is better too. Look, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm happy.
Honey, she's a robot.
The Stepford Wives kind of understands incel culture better than any other modern film. And I use modern in the broader term. And that is why I find it so easy to revisit. The concept is clear. The mystery may be known now, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this is something very horrific that is going to happen and going to keep happening. There is no happy ending. Joanna is a robot, no salvation, just Stepford. Then there is 2004 Stepford Wives that I only ended up watching because fellow YouTuber Aries and IRL friendo BKR told me that she had been working on a similar idea to this, but ended up moving that video aside to work on her recent video about Blonde, which you should also check out. It's very good, and BKR is just the best person ever. So in honor of our friendship, this is now a crossover video.
Ever since we met, you've beaten me at everything. You're even better sex. Don't deny it.
I wasn't going to.
2004 Stepford Wives is... Jesus. How do you even sum up the reverse sexism and bullshit of this film? So in this incarnation, Joanna is a reality television executive who ends up ruining a man's life when the show produces what is essentially Netflix's The Ultimatum, a show called I Can Do Better. And the contestant's wife decides to leave him for a bunch of other guys who she sleeps with on the show because she realizes she can do better. And you know what? Statistically speaking, she probably could.
I love Hank deeply and forever with all my heart. And I would never do anything to hurt him. But I can do better.
During the announcement of this show, the husband from the program comes in. Joanna is almost shot, gets fired from her job because of this, and realizing that she has become a miserable, career-focused ice queen, decides to move to Stepford with her submissive husband, Walter.
That man, Hank. Right before he tried to kill you, he went to see his ex-wife and 5 of her new boyfriends.
He did?
He shot all of them. The wife is in critical condition, and 4 of the guys are on life support.
Wow, an insecure man shot his wife. Love that being used for comedy. The entire film is about strong, independent career women being broken by their husbands who feel emasculated by the successes of their wives. Oh, and there is one gay couple where the femme husband Roger is mocked for being too flamboyant.
Jerry and I have been in couples counseling for over a year. And finally, I just couldn't take it anymore. I howled, "You've become a gay Republican." And he said, "What's wrong with that?" I said, "What's wrong with that? That's like wanting to be gay with a bad haircut."
Exactly.
This is their way of upgrading the film to a modern day because, you know, even in gay couples, there's a woman. Am I right? The film stars Matthew Broderick as Walter. It stars Nicole Kidman as Joanne. It stars Bette Midler. You got a little bit of Christopher Walken. And most importantly, you have Glenn Close. In many ways, Stepford Wives 2004 operates on the mythology of feminism in the aughts. Feminism is a dirty word used by lesbians and man-haters. Women have accomplished things, but they have emasculated their husbands in the process. They have won. Women are equal now, so please stop complaining about porn and titties and everything else. Be nice to your husbands. They want to come home to a nice home-cooked meal. Why is that so hard? Of course they want to turn you guys into robots. You're so mean. It would already be bad, but the kicker is the twist. So in this film, rather than Walter actually turning Joanna into a Stepford robot, it's a fake out. They actually have a conversation and team up because you know what? If you just were nice to your husband and you were equals, then everything would be fine. And they work together to stop the new Christopher Walken's evil, who is nicknamed after Microsoft because I guess they didn't want to upset Disney in 2004. But the real kicker is that it's revealed after Christopher Walken is shown to be a robot that Glenn Close is the one who created Stepford.
All of this, Mike, the wives, Stepford, this was all your idea?
Yes. All I wanted was a better world. A world where men were men and women were cherished and lovely. Does anyone have a screwdriver?
That's right. It was a white woman's fantasy the whole time. And there is something very apt about casting Glenn Close specifically in this role. Let's have a small Fatal Attraction Glenn Close tangent.
I pity you because you're sick.
Why? Because I won't allow you to treat me like some slut you can just bang a couple of times and throw in the garbage?
In Susan Faldi's constantly relevant text, Backlash, the Undeclared War Against American Women, she calls out Fatal Attraction specifically and the era it was created in. As Faldi shares, in the late 80s, Hollywood would, in response to the feminist fever of the 70s, start trying to take down the independent woman. You know, humble them, show that there is this idea that women have given up having it all because they can't be mothers, they can't be wives, they can't have functioning relationships, all the defrosting of the ice queen tropes that we are used to seeing in this time period. But specifically in the 80s, what Faldi highlights is that during this era, the ills and struggles that women were facing were largely made up by the media. But not just that. Every time there was a problem with what women had, that was laid on the feet of feminism. They had made it in getting the right to vote and civil rights, but they gave up having men and babies.
If you got everything, you know everything, you can do everything.
No,
you got your own car, you got all this, you can protect, you got a guard dog and a handgun. The guy is thinking, where do I fit in here?
Faldi quotes an article by Mona Sharon, a young law student for the National Review, which, disclaimer, the National Review is a conservative paper, but these sort of sentiments were seen in Harper's Bazaar, New York Times, etc. So the National Review may have said it the loudest, but they were saying what a lot of people were thinking. The article is called The Feminist Mistake, and it says, quote, "In dispensing its spoils, women's liberation has given my generation high incomes, our own cigarette, the option of single parenthood, rape crisis centers, personal lines of credit, free love, and female gynecologists. In return, it has effectively robbed us of one thing upon which the happiness of most women rests: men." And it really is striking when you read Backlash how all these people were saying that feminism had turned women into these successful career women who were barren lesbians with too much money, too much sex, and no babies. Which, as a millennial, sounds really nice. Enter Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction. Originally conceived by the screenwriter as a morality tale about a man who engages in an affair after flipping through his little black book after his wife goes away, he ends up having an affair with a woman who gave him a number many years ago, and he decides to fuck around and find out, essentially, and shit gets real. But it is always framed as his fault. Eventually, when the movie was sold, it kept getting tweaked and tweaked, especially when Michael Douglas joined and said he wasn't going to play some weak man, whatever that means. Eventually, it started off as a story about a man who destroyed his own marriage and relationship due to his own selfishness, became the narrative of a crazy bitch who became obsessed with a man because she was too much of a girl boss and made her womb crazy. Aristotle would be proud. Glenn Close was launched into a whole new stratosphere of iconic, to the point where she got nominated for an Academy Award for this performance. It is one of her most well-quoted, well-known, and iconic roles. And following this, you can argue that most of her roles have been powerful women fighting about their vulnerability with power. But most notable for this time period, book editor Alex Flores in Fatal Attraction is a character that very clearly has roots in the backlash against feminism, by having a career-minded, successful woman be completely undone by the raw power of Michael Douglas's dick, which was a reoccurring thing with sexual thrillers. Don't know why. Maybe Catherine Zeta knows what we don't. One of the things that really illustrates this in Backlash are all of the horrible quotes behind this production that makes it sound so unhinged.
In Line's analysis, the most unfeminine women are the ones clamoring for equal rights. You hear feminists talk, and the last 10, 20 years you hear women talking about fucking men rather than being fucked, to be crass about it. It's kind of unattractive, however liberated and emancipated it is. It kind of fights the whole wife role, the whole childbearing role. Sure, you've got your career and your success, but you are not fulfilled as a woman. For the ideal of the feminine woman, he points to his wife. My wife has never worked. She's the least ambitious person I've ever met. She's a terrific wife. She hasn't the slightest interest in doing a career. She kind of lives this with me, and it's a terrific feeling. I come home and she's there. Michael Douglas harbored similar ill will for feminism and its effects. He told a reporter, Michael Douglas harbored similar ill will for feminism and its effects. He told a reporter, if you want to know, I'm really tired of feminists. Sick of them. They've really dug themselves into their own grave. Any man would be a fool who didn't agree with equal rights and pay, but some women now, juggling with career, lover, children, childbirth, wifehood, have spread themselves too thin and are very unhappy. It's time they looked at themselves and stopped attacking men. Guys are going through a terrible crisis right now because of women's unreasonable demands.
How could you do this to us? Because I was just like you. Overstressed, overbooked, underloved. I was driven, exhausted. Until late one night I came home to find Mike with Patricia. My brilliant, blonde, 21-year-old research assistant.
At times, it almost feels like Stepford Wives 2004 was made in response to the ideas that Faldy was saying, treating it as an over-exaggeration, because while this is a quote-unquote satire, it treats all the female characters with this sort of ingrained cruelty, where Matthew Broderick is just kind of like the ultimate soft boy, and you're really meant to feel bad for him, and it is framed in a way that it really puts a lot of fault on the women for choosing to be successful.
You're furious because we thought of it first while you were trying to become men. We decided to become gods.
Let me ask you something. These machines, these Stepford Wives, can they say I love you?
Now, there could have been something with Glenn's character if it was a commentary on white feminism or privilege, or how conservative women can actively do work to undo the efforts of liberal women. Nope, it's just she made her husband feel sad, he cheated on her, and this was her way of fixing it. Stepford Wives 04 suffered from on-set tensions between the leads, producers making changes to the script, and the inability to meld the ideas of satire and camp that it so badly wanted to work with. It also really only highlighted the backlash against feminism and had nothing to say about the role that women occupy in power, which is a weird thing to do out of Stepford Wives adaptations. I mean, Joanna is not a successful breadwinner. She just has her own thoughts and opinions and feelings, and that's enough. That's the point. It's also weird in the 2004 film that instead of being robots, the women are transformed by a brain chip. But then why is one of the women an ATM? Where is the money coming from, Frank Oz? All right, moving on to the headliner.
And I don't want to be here anymore.
Don't Worry, Darling, the drama-filled thriller and second directorial installment by Booksmart's Olivia Wilde, is pulling from Stepford very clearly and obviously, making it for a new era. Except it forgets that we've been here before and has really nothing of value to say. It isn't a horrible movie, and in fact, the behind-the-scenes stuff was such a deterrent to the film itself that I think it consumed the narrative in a way where it's easy to forget how much of a nothing burger this film is. Like, without it, DWD would have just been called a modern-day Stepford Redux and it would be done. Don't Worry, Darling is about Jack and Alice Chambers, played by Harry Styles and Florence Pugh, a happy couple living in Victory, California, a 50s-ish town created and paid for by the mysterious Victory company that Jack works for. One day after seeing a plane crash, Alice goes beyond where people are allowed and sees a mysterious building. She touches it and wakes up suddenly back in her bedroom. She doesn't remember how she got back, but starts suffering from these intense hallucinations. Everyone ignores what she says is wrong, and after a fellow wife with similar unease harms herself, Alice's paranoia only gets stronger. What goes from being a happy, young, very sex-fueled couple becomes one where Alice's concerns are always getting kissed away or fucked away until neither kissing nor fucking can fix anything. Olivia's comments about the sex scenes and the focus on female pleasure that the film leaned into was made very strange and uneasy when it is revealed that Florence Pugh's character has been put into a very intense AI simulation by her boyfriend, who was inspired by the Jordan Peterson-like Chris Pine character, Frank. All of those sex scenes, all that intimacy we saw before is rape. And unless Wilde was trying to pull a Catherine A. McKinnon misquote by saying all sex is rape, which I really don't think that she is doing, it is a lack of understanding that undermines the whole project, even though she is trying to backlash that now when she's the one who brought it up. Like, girl, you said the shit, own it. In Stepford Wives, the original, we hear and see husbands sexually fondle their wives, and in both adaptations there is a scene of our protagonist walking in on a sexual encounter between a couple. You don't see anything, but you hear the sex, and you hear the woman saying her husband is king. Joanna, Bobby, and Roger in the 2004 version hear sounds of pleasure, but recognize the performance in it. Not only because they see how beautiful the women are, but how uninteresting and controlling the men are. They aren't men who care about giving pleasure. They care about the illusion of being sex gods. In the sex scenes with Jack and Alice, they are initially framed as pleasure. And there is one scene where they have sex at Frank's house, and while the focus is on Alice's face, we get Chris Pine showing up and being a weirdo. And it's very hard not to feel like, why were we being told about Harry Styles eating out a woman so often if it's gonna be like this? Now, if Wilde hadn't made those comments, I'm sure we would have just seen these moments for what they are: dubious consent with the illusion of wanting to pleasure your partner. The rapist cult leader Keith Raniere was said by his victims to perform oral sex on them, but this was done in a way to control them and make them feel as if they were consenting when they had really been so brainwashed into being sexually assaulted. But no, bad quotes were made because there was an idea of sort of girl bossing the situation, which girl bossing is the detriment to all great female media at the moment because, dear God, you don't have to announce it. This is not bad Cinderella. Why is it like this? We find out in the last half an hour that this is a simulation, and I know this because I saw it at an Alamo Draft House, and you get your check at the last half an hour, and that's when everything kind of came together. We get a flashback and we find out that Alice is actually a successful surgeon and her boyfriend, Jack, is an out-of-work singer who started listening to the podcast by Frank. And this entire simulation is a project based on Frank's vision of a 50s-ish style. And I say 50s-ish because As people have pointed out, literally all of the women's hair fashions are like 3 different decades of style. But it's a world where men are in power for no other reason rather than just being men. And these men have to literally go out and work full days of hard work to pay the rent, to afford both rent and food, but then also be in a simulation, which so pathetic. And again, this would be interesting if we saw this sooner. There is no reason to wait until the last half an hour to explain this stuff. And even that wouldn't be so bad if the movie wasn't so fucking long, and if Florence Pugh had something more to do than look completely horrified, surrounded by symbolism. Like, we get it, girl. We get it. This is a dystopia. You are in a yellow wallpaper situation. And what's worse is we don't know who Alice is as a character, what she wants, her ambition. And the little bit we see of her past doesn't tell us a lot, just that she worked and loved her work. But that's not a character. One of the joys of watching and reading the Stepford Wives is that it starts off with Joanna and her friends trying to figure out what the hell is going on. We find them in personhood and then deal with the tragedy of seeing it ripped out from under them by the hands of their husbands. When you realize that Stepford is essentially Daylight of the Living Corpses, that is what's chilling. When we watch that ending scene of them in the supermarket, we are watching dead women's shells walk around, shopping. And with Joanna especially, the movie takes time to show us that Joanna wants to have her own career, and how asking Walt to help take care of the kids one time while she works on something is an issue. Plus, through the relationship she has with other women, you see more of her own drive. We see her initiative. Until we see Alice outside of the looking glass, we have no idea who she is. She's just a blank canvas for the audience to follow, and in that treatment is hardly better than the person Jack wants her to be. There's a scene in the Stepford Wives 75 where Joanna is asked by a prominent photographer what she wants from her art, and she says the following.
I want somewhere, someday, someone to look at something and say, hey, that reminds me of an Ingalls. Ingalls was my maiden name. I guess I want to be remembered.
Despite everything, whenever I rewatch this movie, this is the moment that, to me, highlights the tragedy of the Stepford Wives. The sorrow is knowing that her husband is taking away from her the only thing she's ever wanted, to be known and valued by her own name. And that is gone. That is the tragedy. Another thing the movie expands upon is that we are constantly seeing what the men are up to and Walt's complicity in the project. It adds up to the tension. It adds to the tension when we all know what's going on when everyone else doesn't. Kind of like how in Rope you are constantly aware that there's a dead body in the trunk when everyone is just having a dinner party. Another standout moment in the film, among many standout moments, is after Joanna goes to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist tells her that she needs to take her children and leave.
All right, now listen. I'll give you a prescription which you have filled. Then you gather up your children and you get the hell away. Don't tell your husband, don't tell anyone, just go wherever you feel safe.
Joanna comes home and finds that her children have been taken from her and are at the Men's Association. This is very much an allegory for domestic violence and the reality of how when a woman is about to leave an abusive partner, that is the most dangerous time for them, especially if they have children that can be used as tools to keep the woman underfoot. In this case, the main thing that keeps Joanna from leaving at the very moment she feels most threatened is that she has 2 children that she has to protect. If this man, her husband, who says that he loves her, is willing to do this to her, what does that mean for their children? What does it mean for her daughters to grow up in a place raised by a robotic mom whose only purpose in life is to cook and clean and to pretend to have orgasms? The flaw of Don't Worry, Darling is that it has really nothing to say about the themes it is engaging with. Not to mention that its protagonist couple are white and young, while actors of color in the film have discussed having their scenes cut out. One of the elements that the Stepford book ends with is a black couple, the first black couple in Stepford, arrives and the black wife sees and notices Joanna. There is an implication that this desire for the perfect submissive woman isn't just a factor of white patriarchy, but patriarchy in general. Even in the movie, the announcement of a black couple coming to Stepford is what allows the women to find out more about the lives of the wives before this transformation.
Have you heard? It's just spreading like wildfire. A black family's moving into town. Oh. Think that's good? I think it's good. Well, I don't know if I think it's good so much as I think it's natural. Considering, well, I mean, after all, we are the most liberal town around.
Stepford?
Liberal? Well, sure. We had the first Chinese restaurant in Fairfield County.
Ah, yes.
To have your main villain be inspired by Jordan Peterson, but ignore that the villains of his ire include non-binary people, trans women, and women of color is one of the gross oversights about what feminist satire looks like now versus the 70s. Jordan Peterson and his ilk aren't just sexist. They are part of this right-wing intellectual ilk that have marketed traditional ideas to an audience of men and some women, if we're being honest, to feel depowered and disenfranchised by women. And the movie says nothing about that. It's just a twist. And that's the problem with a lot of modern elevated horror thrillers that want to have a political bent but ignore foundational elements or don't have an interest in storytelling other voices. Stepford came out in '75, right before the massive backlash towards the feminist movement would hit in the early 1980s, forcing back many of the accomplishments of women and seeing certain female figureheads take the social accomplishments of feminism but throw away the movement. It is very much a texting conversation with the era, as put in The Cyborg Mystique, The Stepford Wives and Second Wave Feminism. The themes of The Stepford Wives dovetail so closely with those of second wave feminism that the film can be viewed as a popularization of some of the most persistent concerns of the women's liberation movement of the 1960s and early 1970s. The film's examination of the plight of the dissatisfied middle-class housewife, its parody of the fetishization of housework, its explicit critique of the nuclear family, and its relentless focus on the constructedness and artificiality of female beauty are key issues to which second wave feminists, particularly radical feminists, drew public attention. Now, there were some feminists who did not like this film because they felt like it was too mean to men, and they kind of pulled a not all men criticism, which, you know, is its own problem.
Joe, Walter really came through for you. So how's your marriage now? Is everything just perfect?
No way. But we're doing just great.
Second wave feminism, as important as it was in a lot of ways, there's a lot to unpack there. But Stepford Wives 75 is trying to do so. Stepford Wives 04, for all its many, many, many sins, is in line with the 2000s attitude of women, eat a Snickers. You have girl power now. Everything is fine. We may look at it with absolute cringe, and there is certainly some satire there, but it's not clever enough to be meaningful in an era of filmmaking when, you know, melting your white power girl boss should be a lesbian but trapped in a heteronormative characterization character was like the go-to. To quote my beautiful friend, BKR, ultimately the film is like, loosen up, ladies. It's your own fault if you're stuck like that. Men aren't that bad, which is so disingenuous and annoying, especially since we are experiencing a similar backslide to the 1980s now. The complacency is the worst part. Bingo. Carrying on that thread, Don't Worry Darling is barely in conversation with the 2010s, which isn't surprising because Hollywood has failed to make any real interesting feminist anything in the mainstream. When we look at the Me Too movies that have come out, we see Bombshell, a movie about women at Fox News who were both victims and people who peddle anti-feminist garbage. There's an upcoming Me Too movie produced by Brad Pitt, who is currently being accused of domestic violence. The movie is about journalists from the New York Times who exposed Harvey Weinstein's history of abuse and sexual misconduct against women, when Brad worked with Weinstein after two of his partners were harassed by him and he knew about it. Don't get me wrong, there is nothing inherently wrong with being predictable in a genre that has pre-existing tropes. I mean, I love Do Revenge. It is clearly something that is pulling from Heathers, Jawbreakers, and other dark teen dramas. But it still updates itself with the language and dynamics of a modern era. A more diverse cast, including a Latina lead, the fact that the co-lead is a lesbian, understanding the dynamics that young women are dealing with social media and technology versus the 2000s. That's how you say something new while homaging the greats. Don't Worry Darling cannot say anything about an experience it just doesn't understand or people it doesn't center. It can only gasp very loudly into our ears as we watch Florence Pugh wrap plastic wrap around her head for the 50th time. This video is brought to you by Mubi, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, incredible cinema, especially at this time of the year. Every day Mubi premieres a new film from iconic directors to emerging auteurs, and there is always something to discover from all across the globe. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected. It is your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere, any place, everything, everywhere, all at once. Right now, this October, there is a real gluttony of really fun and interesting horror films. Streaming right now in the United States and Canada are Lake of Dracula, which is a Japanese horror film I had never seen before, but I found it totally engrossing and interesting to watch. The Love Witch, a classic that I have loved forever and ever, and I try to watch it wherever I can get it, and it was great getting to revisit it on Mubi. And then Inferno, which is part of Dario Argento's Three Mothers trilogy. I'd really only seen Suspiria, so getting to see Inferno for the first time was a lot of fun. And while everyone loves Suspiria the most, I'm trying to be a completist. I enjoyed it, and while it's not my favorite Argento, I'm glad I got an opportunity to watch it on Mubi. Lake of Dracula and The Love Witch are streaming on Mubi in the US and Canada, and Inferno is streaming in the US. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/princessweeks. That is mubi.com/princessweeks. Enjoy 30 days of movies for free.